4 women attacked the billionaire in the restaurant, then froze when they saw who the 16-year-old black girl was. Quiet, everyone. Phones on the table now. The voice cut through the elegant buzz of the gilded spoon like a knife. 4 women wearing catering company uniforms had just locked the front door of Miami's most expensive restaurant. Adrian Sterling, CEO of Sterling Holdings and one of the richest men in the country, barely had time to process what was happening. He was dining alone at his favorite corner table when he felt the cold barrel of a gun pressed against his back. "You're going to transfer us $50 million now, or we'll start shooting your rich friends," whispered the leader of the robbers, a stocky woman with a scar on her face. At the next table, a black girl of only 16 was calmly sipping her iced tea. She wore a simple school uniform and had a warm backpack at her feet. She seemed completely oblivious to the chaos unfolding around her. "Hey, kid!" shouted one of the robbers, pointing her gun at the cell phone on the table. "Are you deaf?" The girl, whose name was Lena, slowly looked up. There was no fear there, just a disturbing, almost tedious serenity, as if being in an armed robbery was as common as waiting for the bus. "I'm listening," she replied calmly, placing her glass down. "I was just finishing my meal. My mother always said that wasting a perfectly good iced tea is disrespectful to those who have none." The comment about her mother made something flicker in her eyes, a deep, painful memory. 6 months ago, General Charlotte Hayes had died under mysterious circumstances. Officially, it was a heart attack. But Lena knew the truth. Her mother had uncovered a corruption scheme that went all the way to the top and paid with her life. The flashbacks came in bursts. Her mother teaching her military strategy in the backyard. "Observe everything, daughter. The environment, the exits, the enemy's weak points." The deep voice echoed in her mind as her eyes discreetly scanned the restaurant. "What a funny kid," the leader sneered, approaching her. "Let's see if you're still funny after I—" "Ma'am," Lena interrupted, her voice still annoyingly calm. "You have approximately 4 minutes and 37 seconds before the police arrive. The silent alarm system was activated when you forced that door open." The robber froze. "How do you know that?" "Basic observation." The manager discreetly tapped his watch 3 times when you entered. "Standard panic code. I saw it in the security manuals my mother used to bring home." For a second, there was silence. Then the leader laughed. A cruel, disbelieving laugh. "Look, we have a genius here. A kid who thinks she's smart." She turned to Adrian. "Transfer now, or the first shot will be to this smart-ass kid's head." Adrian trembled, picking up the phone with shaking hands. His eyes met Lena's for a second. The girl blinked once deliberately. Then she looked at the chandelier above the leader's desk, then at the fire extinguisher on the wall, then back at him. It was silent language, a plan being communicated without words. Adrian had built a billion-dollar empire by reading people and situations. And something about that girl, her upright posture, her calculating gaze, her absolute lack of fear, told him she was no ordinary victim. She was something else entirely. "I need my digital reader to make the transfer," he said, his voice taking on a strange firmness. "It's in my bag." "Slow down," ordered the leader, taking a step back. That's when Lena moved. It wasn't a rash teenage move. It was precise, calculated, almost robotic in her efficiency. 1 second she was sitting. The next, she had kicked the table leg with exact force, sending the leader's plate flying straight into her face. A woman screamed, momentarily blinded by hot sauce. Lena didn't stop. She grabbed the chair and threw it at the chandelier above them. Glass and crystal exploded, raining down on the robbers and creating instant chaos. "Back door now!" she shouted to Adrian, who didn't hesitate. The other 3 assailants reacted, but their weapons were now a problem. With the hostages running in panic, they had no clear targets. One of them fired at the ceiling, trying to regain control. Lena was already on the move again. She grabbed the fire extinguisher from the wall and sprayed foam directly into the shooter's face. The woman staggered, blinded, and coughing. "Damn, kid!" roared another, lunging forward. But Lena didn't fight like a scared teenager. Her movements were trained, precise, block, parry, counterattack. exactly at the pressure points her mother had taught her during years of informal military training. The stocky assailant fell to her knees, her arm twisted at an impossible angle. Lena was already backing away, creating distance. "You girls picked the wrong restaurant," she said, her voice still calm, almost polite. "And you definitely picked the wrong person to threaten in front of me." The leader, still wiping sauce from her eyes, finally saw her clearly. She saw the military posture, the precision of the movements, the total absence of hesitation that only comes from extensive training. Who? Who the hell are you?" she stammered. Lena didn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the entrance where sirens could now be heard. 4 minutes and 40 seconds. She had calculated it almost perfectly. Adrian, now standing safely near the kitchen, washed and all. That girl, who he had assumed was just a middle-class student dining alone, had just diffused a situation that could have ended in tragedy. 3 minutes, Lena announced, checking an imaginary watch. "I suggest you drop your weapons before my colleagues arrive." "Your colleagues?" The leader scoffed, but there was uncertainty in her voice now. Lena smiled. Not a teenage smile, but something much older, wiser. "My mother was General Charlotte Hayes, commander of the 7th Special Operations Division." She paused, letting the name sink in. She may be dead, but her men still look after the family, and they don't like it very much when someone threatens the general's daughter. That was when the kitchen door opened. They weren't police officers. They were 3 military-built women dressed in civilian clothes, but with the unmistakable posture of soldiers. They said nothing. They just positioned themselves strategically surrounding the robbers. The leader turned pale. She recognized military training when she saw it. "Drop your weapons on the floor. Hands on your heads," ordered the oldest of the 3 in a voice that brooked no argument. The robbers obeyed, finally realizing they had made a catastrophic mistake. Lena calmly returned to her table and picked up her backpack. Inside it, Adrian could see briefly. There was something that made his blood run cold. Military documents, surveillance photos, a notebook with files labeled Operation Phoenix. This girl was not in the restaurant by accident. "Sorry to interrupt your dinner, Mr. Sterling," Lena said politely, as if she hadn't just foiled an armed robbery. "I hope we can talk after the police are done here. I have some questions about your involvement with Trident Industries." Adrian's blood ran cold. Trident Industries, the private defense contractor that had government contracts, the same company his father had been investigating before he died. Lena was already leaving, but she paused at the door and looked back. "Oh, and Mr. Sterling, don't try to run. We have people at every exit in this city. My mother taught me well. Always have a plan B, C, and D." The robbers were being handcuffed, but Adrian now realized that they might just be pawns in a much bigger game, a game that she, a seemingly ordinary teenager, was playing with the mastery of a general. And the question echoing his mind was terrifying. If Lena was 16 and already like this, what exactly had her mother trained her to be? If you're wondering how a girl managed to turn the table so quickly, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Because the truth about who Lena really is and what she's planning goes far beyond a simple heroic rescue. That was just the beginning. 3 hours later at the police station, Adrian Sterling signed the final documents of his statement, with hands that were still shaking slightly. Detective Garcia closed the folder with a sigh of relief. "Mr. Sterling, you were incredibly lucky to have that girl in the restaurant," she said admiringly. 16 years old, and she acted like a trained operative. Adrian forced a smile, but his mind was working at full speed. Lena wasn't luck. She was a very calculated and dangerous threat. When he walked out the back door of the police station, he found his private attorney, David Peterson, waiting by the limousine. "I need you to investigate everything about Lena. Mother, father, school, medical history. I want to know even what brand of toothpaste she uses," Adrian ordered as he got into the car. "I've already started," David replied, handing him a tablet. "General Charlotte Hayes, deceased 6 months ago. Official cause, massive heart attack." But here's the interesting part. Adrian read quickly. The general had been the Pentagon's internal audit director, investigating irregular military contracts. Her last investigation focused precisely on Trident Industries. My God, he murmured, the blood freezing in his veins. Trident Industries was one of the country's leading suppliers of military technology, and Adrian, through carefully structured shell companies, was the largest individual shareholder. Very few people knew this or should have known. The girl mentioned Trident, he said, his voice low and tense. She knows. David adjusted his glasses nervously. Adrian, if the general found out about the overpriced contracts, the unauthorized weapons tests, the kickbacks to senators, silence. He cut him off, looking at the driver. Not a word about that in the car, but it was too late for silence. His cell phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. Hello, Mr. Sterling. Thank you for not mentioning our agreement to the police. Tomorrow, 3 p.m., Coffee Corner on 5th Avenue. We need to talk about the future of Trident and your legacy. Adrian felt bile rise in his throat. How did that kid have his private number? He typed quickly. I don't know who you think you are, but I'm not threatened by children. The reply came instantly. Neither was my mother. But 72 hours after confronting you about the $840 million embezzled in Phantom equipment maintenance, she was dead. Coincidences are fascinating, don't you think? Adrian deleted the message with trembling fingers. How did she know the exact amount? Those documents were locked in supposedly impenetrable digital safes. I won't, he said aloud, more to himself. It's blackmail from a teenager traumatized by her mother's death. But even as he said it, his mind was already calculating the damage. If Lena had evidence, and she clearly had access to information she shouldn't, a scandal would destroy not only Trident, but his entire fortune. 3 decades of empire building reduced to ashes. The next day, at 2:45 p.m., Adrian was sitting in the coffee corner wearing sunglasses and a scarf, a ridiculous disguise that any professional paparazzo would see through. But it wasn't the press he was worried about. Lena arrived punctually at 3 p.m. school backpack on her back, crumpled uniform, worn sneakers. She looked exactly like what she was, a black teenager from the suburbs, except for her eyes. Those eyes contained the calculating coldness that Adrian had only seen in boardrooms and courtrooms. She sat down without being invited, ordering a hot chocolate as if they were discussing a math test. You know, Lena began casually. My mom used to take me fishing every Sunday. She said patience was a strategist's greatest weapon. Wait for the fish to bite, honey. Don't force it. Let them think they're in control. Adrian didn't respond, his jaw tense. She spent 3 years discreetly investigating you, Lena continued, stirring the chocolate with a straw. She created 47 false identities to infiltrate shell companies. She tracked transfers through 12 tax havens. She recorded 89 hours of compromising conversations. I don't know what you're talking about, Adrian said, but his voice came out hoarse. Lena smiled. Not a teenage smile, but something predatory. Of course you do. That's why you sent that heart attack to my mother. You have no proof. A private autopsy showed digitalis in her blood. It causes an instant heart attack. Virtually undetectable in routine tests, except when you know exactly what to look for. Lena slid a thin folder across the table. This is a copy. The originals are in 17 different secure locations. Adrian opened the folder with trembling hands. There were medical reports, toxicology analyses, even photos of the body during the private autopsy. His world began to crumble. What do you want? He asked, defeated. Justice, Lena replied simply. My mother dedicated 30 years to serving this country. She was killed because she found out you were profiting from the deaths of American soldiers, selling defective equipment, and pocketing the difference. I could destroy you, Adrian hissed, regaining some composure. You are a minor. This illegally obtained evidence would never be admissible in court, and I have unlimited resources. Lawyers who would make your life hell. You're right, Lena interrupted calmly. Court would be complicated. That's why I'm not going to use the courts. She pulled a laptop out of her backpack, opening it to reveal a web page. It was an investigative blog with millions of followers specializing in exposing corporate corruption. Rachel Morrison, Pulitzer Prize-winning investigative journalist, former Marine who served under my mother in Iraq. Lena turned the laptop around. One word from her, and tomorrow morning 12 million people will wake up reading, "The billionaire who killed a general." Adrian felt the floor disappear beneath his feet. You can't prove I ordered. I don't need to prove it in court. I just need to raise enough suspicion. You know how it works. Media scandal, federal investigation, panicked shareholders, plummeting stock prices. Lena closed the laptop. Your empire built on the blood of soldiers would crumble in 72 hours. There was a long, heavy silence. Adrian realized with growing horror that he was cornered by a 16-year-old black girl. All his connections, all his money, all his power, useless against someone who had nothing to lose. But here's what's gonna happen, Lena said, her voice taking on an almost professorial tone. You're going to transfer 51% of Trident shares to a fund controlled by veterans, the men and women my mother commanded. You're going to publicly resign from the board, citing irreconcilable ethical differences. That's extortion, Adrian stammered. No, that's restitution. Lena stood up, throwing $5 on the table for the hot chocolate. You have 48 hours or the whole world finds out that Adrian Sterling made billions while soldiers died using equipment he knew was defective. As she turned to leave, Adrian managed to find his voice. How? How did a 16-year-old girl accomplish all this? Lena paused, looking back with an expression that mixed pain and determination. My mother started training me when I was 6. Military strategy, forensic analysis, computer programming, cryptography. She knew she was dealing with dangerous people. So she prepared me for the day she wouldn't be here to protect me. A single tear rolled down her cheek, the first real emotion Adrian had seen. She turned me into her ultimate weapon of revenge. Every lesson, every training session, every secret shared, all building up to this moment. Lena wiped away the tear angrily. You didn't just kill my mother, Mr. Sterling. You created the very instrument of your own destruction. And with that, she left, leaving Adrian sitting alone with the weight of decades of crimes finally catching up with him. As he looked out the window, watching Lena disappear into the city crowd, a terrifying question echoed in his mind. If a 16-year-old black girl had managed this alone, what else was planned that he didn't yet know about? The truth, more frightening than any blackmail, was that he had completely underestimated not only Lena, but the legacy of military strategy left behind by a general who was always 3 steps ahead of her enemies, even after death. Adrian Sterling didn't get to the top by being passive. 2 hours after the meeting at the cafe, he had already mobilized his best resources. A private investigator and former FBI agent, 3 lawyers specializing in suppressing scandals, and a hacker hired to find where Lena kept the evidence. She's a 16-year-old girl, he said on the phone to his head of security. No resources, no real connections. Find the files and make them disappear discreetly. But what Adrian didn't know was that every move of his was being tracked. In a modest apartment in Brooklyn, Lena watched 3 computer screens simultaneously. At her side, Captain Julia Rodriguez, a veteran who had served 20 years under her mother's command, pointed to one of them. He just hired Secure Trace Investigations, Rodriguez said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. Same company that investigated her mother's death and conveniently found nothing suspicious. Lena nodded, taking notes in a notebook already filled with information. In the last 6 months since her mother's death, she hadn't been alone for a second. Her mother's women, 17 veterans who owed their lives to the general, had become her extended family, invisible guardians, and relentless teachers. He'll try to scare me first, Lena muttered, analyzing patterns. Then, if that fails, physical elimination. That's his pattern. Rodriguez pulled up another screen. We found the accountant he used to launder the bribe money, Thomas Chung, lives in Seattle. He's willing to testify in exchange for immunity. A thin smile crossed Lena's face. My mother always said, the fatal mistake of arrogant generals is to believe they are fighting alone against a lone enemy. The next morning, Adrian found an envelope on his desk. Inside was a single photo. Him leaving the building where his personal lawyer lived was taken less than an hour ago. On the back was a message in elegant cursive. Mr. Sterling, every move is watched. Every call is heard. Give up while you can still choose how you fall. He crumpled the paper in anger, but his hands were shaking. How did she know where he would be? His private investigator, Michael Barnes, called at that moment. "Mr. Sterling, I found something disturbing about the girl." "Go on." "She's not alone. We've identified at least 12 military veterans taking turns watching her, all former special forces. One of them is Julia Rodriguez, a cyber warfare expert who worked on classified operations in the Middle East." Adrian felt the floor disappear beneath him. 12. And that's just the ones we've been able to identify. There are indications that the network is much larger. Barnes hesitated. "Mr. Sterling, this isn't a traumatized teenager seeking revenge. This is a full-scale military operation. General Hayes, she prepared her for this." He hung up abruptly, his mind racing. If Lena had a team of trained operatives protecting her, any attempt to silence her physically would be suicide. There was only one option left. Discredit her publicly before she could expose him. Adrian activated his public relations department. "I want a full campaign. Teenager disturbed by her mother's death, obsessed with conspiracy theories, possibly dangerous. Plant the narrative on blogs, social media, everywhere." But Lena was 3 steps ahead. When the first defamatory posts began to appear online, she already had her response ready. Not with desperate denials, but with a simple video. She's sitting in a modest room, school uniform, looking like an ordinary black girl. "My name's Lena. I am 16 years old. And my mother, General Charlotte Hayes, died 6 months ago investigating corruption in military contracts." She began, her voice calm but firm. "In the coming days, you will see attempts to discredit me. They will say I am disturbed, dangerous, obsessed, but remember, desperate people do desperate things, and the truth always finds the light." The video was posted on an anonymous account and strategically shared. Within 6 hours, it had 2 million views. The David versus Goliath narrative, a young black woman taking on a powerful billionaire, instantly captured the public's imagination. Adrian watched in horror as his smear campaign backfired. Every attempt to attack her only increased public sympathy for her. "How is she doing this?" he shouted at his PR team. The answer came in the form of another envelope. Inside was a flash drive and a note. 48 hours became 24. The transfer or exposure? Choose wisely. "Your propaganda efforts have only accelerated my timeline." Adrian inserted the flash drive with trembling hands. It was a preview, just 30 seconds of what Lena had. Audio recordings of him discussing bribes with senators, emails about defective equipment being deliberately sent to combat zones, and worse, a photo of him meeting with a woman known in intelligence circles as the Fixer, an expert at making problems disappear. The photo was dated 2 days before General Hayes' death. He vomited right there in his $200 million office. Lena wasn't bluffing. She never had been. And now he realized the full extent of his naivety. While he thought he was negotiating with a grieving teenager, she was actually at war with the last and most lethal operation planned by a dead general. An operation that had turned her own daughter into an unstoppable weapon of justice. The secret preparation was not Lena's alone. It was the work of 18 veterans, 3 years of silent investigation, and a meticulously crafted plan that was now unfolding with military precision. Adrian finally understood. He had not just killed a woman. He had murdered a general. And generals do not die without leaving behind devastating posthumous strategies. 23 hours and 50 minutes after the ultimatum, Adrian Sterling stood before his lawyer, signing the documents, transferring Trident's shares with hands that trembled uncontrollably. "This is extortion," he repeated for the 10th time, his voice breaking. "It's restitution," replied Lena, sitting across the table in a neutral office. At her side, her colleague, Rachel Morrison, the investigative journalist, watched everything with the sharp eyes of a predator. Adrian scribbled his final signature. "Done. You win. Now give me the evidence." Lena smiled. Not the smile of a teenager, but of a strategist who had just executed a perfect checkmate. "The evidence, Mr. Sterling? This was never about silencing your truth. It was about ensuring she was heard in the right way." She motioned to Morrison, who opened her laptop. On the screen was a formatted article ready for publication. "The Billionaire Who Killed a General. How Adrian Sterling Profited from Soldiers' Blood." Adrian felt the floor disappear beneath him. You said if I transfer the shares. I said you had 48 hours. You had 24. Lena interrupted coldly. And I said you could choose how to fall. You chose to try to destroy me first. Remember the smear campaigns, private investigators, attempts to hack our servers? His every move was monitored. Rodriguez added, entering the room with a thick folder, including the meeting he had yesterday with Serena Clove, the same fixer who poisoned my mother. Adrian paled. You can't prove. We recorded everything, Rodriguez said, opening the briefcase and spreading photos across the table. Adrian in the discreet cafe, Adrian handing over an envelope, Adrian receiving a disposable phone, directional cameras, parabolic microphones, GPS tracking, military technology has its advantages. But here's the best part, Lena continued, her voice thick with cold satisfaction. You weren't just trying to silence me, you were planning to eliminate Rachel as well. A car accident was scheduled for tomorrow morning. Morrison smiled grimly. Too bad I work with a team. If anything happens to me, 3 other journalists will publish immediately. Adrian was in total collapse now. What do you want? More money? Everything I have? Justice? Lena replied simply. Tomorrow at 6 a.m., this article goes live. At 7 a.m., the FBI will receive all the evidence of corruption, murder, and attempted murder. At 8 a.m., every senator you bribed will receive a copy of the financial records. She paused, letting the weight sink in. At 9 a.m., when the markets open, Sterling Industries stock will plummet. Your investors will flee. Your allies will deny knowing you. And you will experience exactly what my mother felt, watching everything she built being destroyed while you are powerless to stop it. My mother spent 3 years documenting your crimes while soldiers died using equipment you knew was defective. How many families destroyed? How many widows? How many orphans? She stood up, walking until she was face to face with him. You killed my mother because she discovered the truth. You made me an orphan at 16, and you thought you could continue your billionaire lifestyle without consequences. Adrian was devastated, sobbing openly. Now, please, I have a family. And her mother had a daughter. Lena replied emotionless. The difference is that your family will live on, just poor, humiliated, and possibly visiting you in federal prison. Morrison closed the laptop. It's time. Lena turned to leave, but paused at the door. Mr. Sterling, there's a lesson here you never learned. True power doesn't come from money or connections. It comes from integrity, strategy, and loyal allies. You had billions, but you were completely alone. I had only the memory of an honorable mother and an army of people willing to fight for the truth. As she left, Adrian remained alone in the empty office, the empire that took decades to build crumbling around him. The next morning, the headlines exploded across every newspaper, website, and news channel. Adrian Sterling's fall was as spectacular as his rise had been, and at the center of it all was a 16-year-old black girl who had turned grief into justice and revenge into legacy. 6 months later, Lena turned 17, no longer as an invisible orphan, but as the director of the newly created General Hayes Fund, a billion-dollar foundation dedicated to investigating military corruption and supporting veterans' families. The shares transferred from Trident now financed quality equipment for soldiers, while Adrian Sterling served 25 years in federal prison for murder, corruption, and attempted murder. Rachel Morrison won her second Pulitzer for the investigative series that exposed not only Adrian, but an entire network of military fraud that spanned 3 decades. Lena visited her mother's grave every week. We did it, Mom, she whispered, placing fresh flowers. Justice, not only for you, but for all those soldiers. The lesson was crystal clear. True power does not come from wealth or connections, but from unwavering integrity and loyal allies willing to fight for what is right. Adrian had billions, but he was completely alone when he fell. Lena had only the memory of an honorable mother, and she turned that into an army of justice. The best revenge was never to destroy those who hurt you. It was to build a legacy so powerful that it turned tragedy into hope for thousands. If this story of courage, strategy, and justice has touched your life, subscribe to the channel. Because sometimes a 16-year-old black girl with the right training can bring down empires built on blood and lies.